Hi everyone, it's Rael Klein and you're watching Movie of the Week, and the movie of this week was Sunset Boulevard. Basically, if this is your first time watching Movie of the Week, every week we talk about a movie here. You guys comment below your thoughts, and then at the end of every video I say the movie for next week. So the movie for this week was Sunset Boulevard from 1950, so if you haven't watched it, watch it now. And I'm actually about to go out with some friends, so I'm kind of rushing doing this, so sorry if I am too fast or I missed things or whatever. So this is my second time watching the movie, and guess when my first time watching this movie was? It was in film school, in a film class, and I remember this class was, it wasn't my first film class. I think I took it like second semester sophomore year, and definitely we saw this film before the pandemic happened, because that was the semester that the pandemic happened. And the class was like film and something with, it was like film history. So basically we, you know, started from the beginning and went all the way through. I had other film classes prior to them, like more aesthetics and analysis, but this was more like US film history. So yeah, we watched this movie in a class and we obviously like talked a lot about it, but I of course remember everything. I can't remember anything is what I'm saying. It's been 3 years. So, but yeah, so I kind of remember what the film was about, but I didn't really remember what it's about. I just remember it was like one of those films that's known, and you always see that particular end scene, which I'll talk about when I get to it. But so I always like, so this is in black and white obviously, and you know, I always like movies that are like about making a movie, but this wasn't. So I don't know if this is like along the lines of like a film about making a movie, because like technically they were never like really making a movie. It's a lot of it was just like writing a movie, so I think it goes along those lines. But it's different than, you know, there are certain movies, and there's one in school I watched that was like a French film where the entire film they are just making a movie. So this is a little bit different, but it definitely is like writing a movie. And so I find films about like making a movie and like the movie process always to be really interesting. We'll go a little bit more in the screenwriting later, but I also want to mention, so the beginning scene, the opening scene, is he's dead and he's narrating. And I think we've talked about this before, like narrations in films. Like if a film has to have narration, that means it's not strong enough on its own to like tell the story without narration. But that's kind of like films nowadays. This was the 1950, and obviously I can't remember everything, but still I'm sure the technique of narration wasn't as known or that popular. Like this could even be the first time narration was used, probably not, I don't know. But in that way, like the narration didn't make the story like not strong enough. Like it wasn't for the reasons I say about narration nowadays. And I think it was also interesting because what this film is about, like how films are no longer silent. And so it's just interesting, like there was this whole element of narration where like you don't have that on silent films obviously. And so I don't know if that was like done purposely, having narration just to like show even more how the use of language is in film, but it was I think done right in a way. I do feel like the film could have maybe gone without narration, but I think it still worked. And it's kind of weird because at the end he dies and he's still narrating, being like, I'm dead or whatever. And you're like, how is he narrating? He's dead. So it just like, it doesn't, in that element, doesn't make sense. But yeah, I think what this film is really interesting is, I mean, you see a lot of films where it's like the transition between silent films to talkies, and how, you know, there's so many films about that, and they still make films about that nowadays. I guess like Babylon was about that. But I think what's interesting about this film is it's kind of like after that transition, and you know, we're totally into talkies now. It's like far from that transition. It's been a decade or two, whatever. And you still see like someone who was in the silent film who actually like is still holding on to that. And I actually looked up the actress, and she was a really big silent film actor. And you see like she doesn't work for years, and this like is probably like, I don't know if it's not her technically her first role, but probably like the biggest role since doing a silent film. And she went a long time without working, so it kind of is interesting that like that kind of is the way for her. I'm sure she didn't feel the way this character felt, but it was kind of, I feel like at this time there was a lot of like thrillers where it's just like people like with like mental illness and psychotic behavior, because even back then they like didn't understand it, so they had all these films about it. And so this is definitely a woman who is struggling with mental illness and like can't let go of the past and like just is stuck in that era. And so her and this guy, because he's a writer, they start, you know, she has him like work on her piece. And so it's interesting that there's this whole element about writing, because they're talking about films, and yeah, and then he starts working with someone else on writing. Basically the plot, there isn't that many plot points. So I felt like at the beginning, like I kind of like films that have like unique relationships. Like I felt like at the beginning, like his and her relationships were unique, and then, you know, in the end, like she kind of like uses like the fact that like she's mentally ill, like cutting herself to like make him come back and like make him be with her, and kind of in a manipulative way. Yeah, like I feel like at the beginning, like I always find it interesting movies that like have like unique or different relationships, but in the end it like, I don't know what I'm saying with that. But I guess to touch more towards the end of the film, you know, she didn't want him to leave or whatever, so she killed him. And, you know, all the police are there, and she like obviously is having a psychotic episode where she thinks she's like gonna be in this film, because she can't let it go that she's like a film star, and like she thinks the cameras are there because it's a film, not because she's gonna go to prison for killing someone. And so everyone knows that iconic scene where she like goes down the stairs and then like goes into the camera at the end. And so it's very iconic of like, just like, I think it just really shows like people not being able to like move on, because I think that's also something we have nowadays where people in older generations, they're like, I don't understand technology, like all these younger kids, they don't know what they're doing, blah, 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 blah. And even back then they had the kind of the same thing where someone couldn't let go of how films had changed. And it's this idea of like trying to be and like being stuck in that time, I guess. So yeah, it's a very iconic scene when she goes down the stairs and everything. And in the end, it's just like, I think I understand why we watched it in film school. I can't remember anything what we talked about except this one point, which I'll talk about in a second. But I think like, because we did sometimes watch films about films, and so in a way this is about film and kind of about the industry, and I think it shows like the industry where it's not just the transition from silent films to talkies. It kind of shows it later in like, I don't know, trauma, whatever. Yeah, so another thing is I remember when we watched this film, like I was talking about it in one of the shows I worked on, and someone who was like a year older was like, oh my god, my professor like said that, like, because in the beginning there's like a monkey. She said, the person was saying it, that like the woman slept with the monkey. And I was like, what? And I like brought it up to my professor, and I think it was the first year my professor was teaching the class, and she's like, what are you even talking about? Like, I never heard this. What professor was that? Because this is like one of my really big film classes where we would like have like 3 hours on Monday nights would be that class, and then we would actually have like breakout sessions later in the week, and there'd be like 4 different professors, because it was like a huge lecture hall class on Monday nights. So my breakout professor was like, what are you talking about? Like, so, but I think like, I don't know with that, but I mean, there had to be a purpose of why at the beginning there was a dead monkey, other than like the reason he's there. So maybe it kind of is like parallel, like, and then he died, and like this is something she does. She kills all them if they don't, her past lovers or past husbands, except the butler was her first one, but he always still believed. So maybe that's why he's not dead. Anyway, those are my thoughts and feelings about Sunset Boulevard. So comment below what you think. And the movie for next week is Die Hard from 1988. So I guess we haven't really had an action movie yet. And yeah, so make sure you comment your thoughts and feelings for Sunset Boulevard, and make sure you watch Die Hard for next week. Thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and bye.